I bought my father the house he's dreamed of since I was a little girl. The same man who once looked me dead in the eyes and said, "You're wasting your life, Maya. You'll never make it." My name is Maya Jennings. I'm 32 now, but for most of my life, I've been the daughter who didn't do things right. At least, that's how my father saw it. Growing up, I was always a little different from my siblings, while my older brother Aaron followed in my dad's footsteps into real estate and wore blazers at 15, and my younger sister Brielle had this charm that made teachers and boys fall over themselves. I sold candles in mason jars out of my backpack in 8th grade. Dad didn't like dreamers. He liked doers, men with power tools and business degrees, people with 5-year plans and backup strategies. Me? I liked messy ideas, wild creativity, and things that smelled like eucalyptus and hope. My mom, back when she was still alive, used to say I had sunshine in my hands. She believed in what I was building, even when it was just a chaotic mess in our basement. But Dad? He called it a distraction. A hobby, he'd say with that tight, dismissive frown. Not a career. He always said things like, "When are you going to get serious about your life, Maya? That little candle thing isn't going to pay the bills. You'll regret not listening to me." He'd never yell. He didn't need to. His disappointment was loud enough without volume. By the time I turned 25, I had already left college. Twice. And I'd poured every penny I had into my handmade candle business, Lumen & Co. My friends were buying cars and saving for weddings. I was working 2 part-time jobs and living in a shoebox apartment in the city that always smelled like garlic and despair. And still, every time I talked to Dad, he'd end the conversation the same way. "You know, if you just came to work, with me I could show you how to make real money." But I never wanted his kind of money. I wanted something I made, something that felt like mine. I remember one Thanksgiving, probably my lowest point. I showed up late, covered in wax and soot, because I'd had a last-minute pop-up event at a craft fair. It bombed. I barely sold anything. I smelled like smoke. My hair was frizzed from the rain, and my tote bags were soaking wet. Dad looked at me over his wine glass and muttered, "You're wasting your life on that business." That one stung. Not because it was new, but because that night I had almost believed him. I went to my childhood bedroom, shut the door, and cried into a pillow I hadn't touched in years. I could still hear them laughing downstairs, the family that had everything together. But what none of them knew that night was that I had just gotten an email, one that would change everything. A major lifestyle store, Hearth and Hill, had seen my work on Instagram and wanted to talk. About wholesale, about potential collaboration, about placing my candles on their shelves. It wasn't a promise, but it was a spark, and I held on to it like oxygen. I didn't tell anyone, not yet, especially not Dad. He'd find a way to crush it before it had wings, so I went quiet. I worked harder, nights, weekends. I tested formulas, redesigned labels, got my LLC, and learned to speak retail fluently. All while Dad thought I was figuring out when to come to my senses. He had no idea I was already building the future. 1 box at a time. The meeting with Hearth and Hill wasn't just a turning point. It was the moment. I still remember sitting in that cramped coffee shop, my palms sweating as the buyer, a woman named Clara, smelled my morning fog candle and said, This smells like money." She didn't care that I wasn't from a fancy design school. She didn't ask about my GPA or what my dad did for a living. She asked about the story. And I had one. I told her about growing up in a house where candles were the only thing that softened the air between long silences. How Mom lit one every evening during winter, how I used to mix perfume samples in old jelly jars just to recreate that feeling of warmth. I told her I wanted to bring that feeling into people's homes, something simple, something real. She nodded once and said, "Let's start with a trial run. 300 units, 4 cents, 2 weeks." I didn't even have 300 jars in my entire apartment. But I said yes. That night, I slept on the floor, surrounded by wax and wicks. My fingers cramped from pouring, my back ached, and my bank account dipped, under $200. But something in me refused to quit. Maybe it was Mom's voice in my head. Maybe it was the ghost of every Thanksgiving comment I'd swallowed like burnt pie. Maybe it was me, finally starting to believe in myself. The first order sold out. Then came another, and another. Within 6 months, I wasn't just making candles. I was building a brand, a small team, a fulfillment space. I signed a lease on a little warehouse unit and decorated it with the same fairy lights I once used to line my booth at those sad little craft fairs. But I didn't call Dad. Not even when we hit our first $100,000 month. Not when we got featured in Better Living Weekly. Not when I got a business loan to expand. I wanted to. God, I wanted to pick up the phone and say, "See, Dad, I did it, without your help." But part of me still didn't trust him not to ruin it. He didn't ask much either. At family dinners, he'd glance at me and say, "Still doing the candle thing?" Like I was taking a gap year that just never ended, and I'd nod, smile, sip my wine. But Brielle knew. She worked in marketing and couldn't hide the pride when she saw our growth. Online. Aaron, though, barely blinked. He always assumed Dad's approval was the only one that mattered. Then came the fire. Not literal, but close. One of our suppliers sent the wrong batch of wax. It caused defects in hundreds of candles. I had to recall them, issue refunds, halt production, at the worst time of year, right before the holidays. I sat in my office, heart pounding, watching the numbers nosedive. The weight of my staff, my rent, my reputation, it crushed me. For a moment I felt like that girl again, the one soaked in rain and doubt. I thought about calling Dad then, asking for advice, but I didn't, because I knew what he'd say. "This is why businesses fail. You should have gotten a real job." "I told you so." So instead, I got on the floor, packed boxes with my team, and called every single customer myself. I told the truth, owned the mistake, gave them coupons and replacement options. It took weeks to clean up, but people stayed because they believed in me, because I believed in me. And then, just like that, we were back. Stronger, more trusted, respected. I hired 2 more staff. My first full-time employee got benefits. We signed with 2 more retailers. And one afternoon, as I was labeling a box myself just for old time's sake, Brielle called. "Did you see Dad's car?" "No. Why?" "It broke down again on Elm, in front of that old brick colonial he's obsessed with. The one with the arched porch and sunroom?" "Yeah, he stood there staring at it for like 10 minutes. "What did he say?" "He said, 'That right there, that's the kind of house that makes you feel like you did something right with your life.'" And that's when the idea hit me. It wasn't about proving him wrong anymore. It was about doing something right. For him, even if he never saw me coming. I didn't sleep much that night, not because I was stressed, but because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about the business. I was thinking about Dad. That moment Brielle described, him just standing there, staring at the brick colonial like it held some secret wish, kept looping in my head. I knew that house. I remembered it from when I was 10. We'd driven by it one December night, lost on the way to a family friend's Christmas party. The lights were twinkling, the bay windows glowing from inside. I remember how Dad pulled over and just stared, for a second longer than necessary. "That's a real house," he had whispered. Back then, we were renting a cramped split level. Mom did her best to make it feel warm, but money was always tight. Dad worked long hours, came home grumbling about bills, and never let us forget that dreams didn't pay for groceries. But that house? It wasn't just bricks and shingles to him. It was peace, success, validation. So when Brielle told me it was still on the market after all these years, my heart skipped. I pulled up the listing. 3 bedrooms, a sunroom, arched porch, built in 1929, original hardwood floors, and somehow, some insane stroke of timing or fate, it had just dropped in price. It wasn't cheap. Not by a long shot, but I had been saving. Quietly, obsessively. I never splurged, not even when the business hit 7 figures. I still drove my beat-up Honda and lived in a modest apartment above the warehouse. I always told myself the money was for stability, for reinvestment, for growth. But now it felt like maybe it had been for this. I called Brielle the next day. Are you serious about helping me pull this off? Dead serious. But Maya, are you sure he deserves this? I don't know if he does, but maybe I deserve to do it anyway. She didn't argue, because we both knew something. This wasn't about being the good daughter. It was about reclaiming the power he spent years trying to deny me. So I made the call, scheduled the showing. I walked through that house like I already owned it. The crown molding, the fireplace, the built-ins. I could feel my younger self, whispering, "You're not supposed to be here." But the woman I am now? She was louder. She said, "This is exactly where you belong." The agent beamed when I said I'd be paying in full. I told her to keep the name off the paperwork for now. I wanted the surprise to be clean. No early hints, no loopholes. I wanted Dad to walk in with his eyebrows raised and his expectations low and walk out speechless. Brielle helped me stage the house with a few pieces from his old apartment. His leather reading chair, his framed photo of Mom and him in Paris from before everything got heavy. We placed it gently on the mantel. Then came the hard part, getting him there. So I waited. And then, 3 weeks later, his birthday rolled around. I called him, first time in a while. "Hey, Dad? Maya, everything okay?" "Yeah, actually I wanted to take you somewhere for your birthday." "You? Take me somewhere?" "Don't sound so shocked." Pause. "All right. Just don't make me sit through some candle-making workshop." I laughed. It was awkward, but something about it felt new. I picked him up in that same dusty Honda. He scoffed at the missing hubcap, the cracked dashboard, said, "With all this candle nonsense, you'd think you could at least afford a decent car." But I didn't flinch. Not this time. Because I knew exactly where we were headed. And I knew what waited at the end of that drive would shatter everything he thought he knew about me. We drove in silence for most of the ride. Every time I glanced at Dad, he looked out the window like he was trying to guess where we were going, but refusing to ask. That was his thing. He always wanted to seem like he was one step ahead, like he wasn't curious. But I saw his fingers tapping the side of his leg, nervous, suspicious. He didn't recognize the street at first, but the second we turned the corner onto Maple Hollow Lane, something shifted in his face. His brow tightened, his mouth pressed into that familiar, unreadable line. Then he saw the house, and froze. "You've got to be kidding," he muttered. I didn't say anything, just parked and got out. He followed slowly, warily, like he didn't want to get his hopes up, but couldn't stop himself. The brick colonial stood just as tall as it had in our memories. Sunlight glinted off the arched porch. The bay window sparkled. I had lit a candle inside, just one, with the same scent I used to make back when I was 17. Warm birch and firewood. The scent that reminded me of home, even when home didn't always feel like it. "Whose place is this?" Dad finally asked. I smiled. "Come see." He hesitated before stepping up the porch. He ran his hand along the rail, the wood worn, but freshly painted. I could almost see him time-traveling, back to that December night when he called it a real house. I opened the door and let him walk in first. He didn't say a word at first, just stood in the foyer, looking around. The walls were freshly painted, but the details were original. The molding, the oak staircase, the vintage chandelier. I had the living room set just the way I imagined he would have wanted it. Clean, masculine, timeless. Then he saw the fireplace. He walked over and stared at the mantel, at the photo of him and Mom. He didn't touch it, just stood there. Think he stopped breathing for a moment. He turned slowly, looking at me. "Maya, what is this?" "It's your birthday, Dad. Happy birthday." "No, seriously. Whose house is this? Aaron's? Is this some kind of, what, a listing tour? Are you selling houses now?" I almost laughed. Even now, he couldn't imagine me being the one in control. "No," I said softly. "This is your house." He blinked. "What?" "I bought it. It's yours." His jaw twitched, just a little, the way it used to when he was trying not to show emotion. "You bought this house?" "Outright, in your name, no mortgage, no strings." He looked down at the floorboards, back up at the ceiling, then at me again. But how? And finally I said it. Because that little candle thing, it's not little anymore. I pulled out my phone, showed him the brand site, the retailers, the press features, the photo of me in Better Living Weekly with a headline that read, "From Basement to Brand, How Maya Jennings Lit Up an Industry." He stared at it, then at me, and for once, he had no words, just tears. They didn't fall in a dramatic rush. My father wasn't like that, but they gathered silently in the corners of his eyes. And when he turned back to the photo on the mantel, he wiped his cheek without saying a word. That's when I saw it. Not regret, not shame, but relief. Like he had spent years holding something too heavy and finally put it down. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, "I know you never believed in me, and honestly, that hurt for a long time. But I'm not giving you this house to prove you were wrong. I'm giving it to you, because I've stopped needing to hear that I was right." He exhaled, sharp and trembling. Then he said quietly, "Your mother would have been proud of you." It wasn't an apology, but it was the closest he'd ever come, and somehow it was enough. After we walked through the house together, room by room, memory by imagined memory, Dad sat down in the sunroom like he'd lived there for years. The way his shoulders relaxed into the chair, how he exhaled like he'd just put down a heavy load he never told anyone he was carrying. I hadn't seen him like that in a very long time. I sat across from him. He was quiet, not cold, just quiet, which for my father was a whole new language. "You know," I finally said, "I used to picture this moment." He looked at me, his brow still furrowed as if trying to solve the math of what just happened. "I used to daydream about walking you into this house, handing you the keys and saying, 'Remember when you said I was wasting my life?' I chuckled nervously. I'd imagine your face falling, you begging me for forgiveness. I guess I was waiting for a little drama." He cracked a small smile, that rare, flickering one that used to come out only during fishing trips or birthday cake candles. "I would have deserved it," he said finally. I looked at him closely. There was a vulnerability in his face I hadn't seen since Mom passed. Not the proud, stony man who used to dismiss my ideas over the dinner table, but someone older, softer, and maybe, just maybe, regretful. "You know," he continued, "when your mom got sick, everything inside me tightened. I stopped believing good things lasted. I stopped seeing beauty unless it came with a guarantee. When you dropped out of college, when you said you were selling candles full-time, I panicked. It felt like watching someone I love walk into traffic." He shook his head. "I didn't know how to support you without needing to control you." His voice cracked a little on the last word. It hit me harder than I expected. Because in all the years I fought for my place, defended my choices, stood tall in the face of doubt, I had also mourned the father I wished I had. The one who could say, "I'm proud of you." The one who could cheer for me, not warn me, lift me, not judge me. And now, here he was, human, flawed, trying. "I used to think I'd feel powerful in this moment," I said quietly. "But instead, I just feel calm." He nodded slowly. "That's what this house does to you," he whispered, looking around. "It makes everything quieter, softer." I looked at him for a long moment, then said the thing that had been sitting on my chest for over a decade. "I needed you to believe in me, not because I didn't believe in myself, but because I wanted to believe we could stand side by side, that your love didn't have to come with conditions." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he reached over, hesitantly, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed, and placed his hand over mine. "You built something beautiful," he said, "with nothing but wax and willpower, and I see it. Now, I see you. Not the version I wanted, the version I never deserved." I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I thought about every younger version of me, pouring candles in the cold, smiling through rejection, soaking in the warmth of a single online sale, counting coins just to afford new labels. That girl had kept going, even when no one clapped for her, especially when he didn't clap. And now, the applause came in silence, in soft confessions, in the way he gripped the arms of the chair like he didn't want to leave. That evening, before we left, I handed him a small box. He opened it. Inside was a single hand-poured candle in an old glass jar. The label read, "For the daughter you finally see." He held it for a long time. Then, with his voice barely a whisper, he said, "Light it when you visit next time. This house won't feel like home until I hear your footsteps in." I didn't need validation anymore. But that still mattered. Dad moved into the house that same month. I paid for the small renovations he wanted, a new kitchen sink, some landscaping in the back, and a built-in shelf for his old books. But I made one request: leave the sunroom just the way it was. He did. It became his favorite place. He called it the thinking room. Sometimes I'd visit and find him there sipping tea, the candle I gave him burning low in the corner. He never said much during those visits, but he always greeted me with something I'd never received from him before. A softness. The kind of look that didn't demand anything. Just presence. A few months after he moved in, he called me out of the blue, something he almost never used to do. "Hey, I saw your interview on TV. That woman on the business channel was talking about your revenue last quarter." "Yeah?" I didn't understand half of it. "But you looked confident, like your mom used to when she stood up to me." We both laughed. There was something honest about it, uncomplicated. No digs. No hidden lectures, just truth and healing for both of us. I think people always imagine that when you finally prove someone wrong, especially someone who doubted you for years, you feel triumphant, powerful, like you're standing on a mountaintop, with the wind in your hair and a fire in your chest. But for me, it wasn't that. It was quiet. It was watching my father sit in the home he never thought he'd have, built with the success he never thought I could earn. It was lighting a candle not to prove a point, but to remember the light that never went out. And it was realizing that I didn't do all of this to change him. I did it because somewhere, deep inside me, a girl who used to work with wax and wicks just wanted to be seen. Not praised, not awarded, just seen. And now, every time I visit that house and walk into the sunroom, I see that version of me reflected back. Not in his eyes, but in my own. He once told me I was wasting my life on my business. But it turns out, it was that business, my belief in it, in myself, that gave him the very thing he spent his whole life chasing. Home, not just a roof and four walls, but peace. And maybe, just maybe, that was the kind of legacy I was always meant to build. Not just in wax, not just in sales, but in the quiet spaces between forgiveness and love.